Hey everyone, I'm here to help you relax and drift off tonight. If you enjoy using these videos to fall asleep, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more calming content. Share where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I'd love to know. Now settle into a cozy spot, take a deep breath, and let's start unwinding together. In the heart of the forgotten quarter of Eldersham, where time seemed to linger in the mist and memories whispered through the cracks of ancient stone, there stood a grand library known as the Arcanum Athenaeum. Its towering shelves, laden with leather-bound tomes and brittle manuscripts, had long been the sanctuary of scholars and dreamers alike. Yet beneath its venerable exterior lay a secret. At night, when the last visitor had left and the heavy silence of midnight took hold, the library stirred with voices that no human could produce. Books began to whisper secrets. Generations ago, it was said that the library was built upon an old sacred site, where ancient scribes inscribed not only history, but magic. Over time, those inscriptions were bound in books, and as centuries passed, the library absorbed the sorrow, wisdom, and enchantments of countless souls. Now in the quiet hours of the night, the books whispered to one another, recounting hidden truths, forbidden lore, and the names of those lost to time. Ava Whitlock, a graduate student with a passion for the occult and forgotten histories, had heard murmurs of the Arcanum Athenaeum ever since her childhood. In her dreams, the library called to her, a siren song of knowledge and mystery. When she received a mysterious letter inviting her to study the library's rare manuscripts for her thesis on ancient esoteric lore, she felt destiny guiding her footsteps. On a crisp autumn evening, with the waning light of dusk painting the cobblestone streets in hues of amber and shadow, Ava approached the library. Its ornate iron gates creaked open as if welcoming an old friend. The building's stone facade, decorated with intricate carvings of mythical beasts and celestial symbols, hinted at secrets waiting to be unraveled. Inside, the air was redolent with the scent of aged paper, wax, and a faint trace of something otherworldly. Ava spent her first day exploring the labyrinthine corridors and vast reading rooms. She marveled at the library's collection. Shelves upon shelves of books that spanned every imaginable subject, many of which were rumored to be cursed or enchanted. Yet amid all this treasure trove of knowledge, a strange, almost imperceptible murmur tickled her ears, whispers that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Dismissing it at first as the sound of settling stone and rustling pages, she nonetheless could not shake the feeling that the library was alive in a way she had never known. Late that night, as the clock struck midnight and the last echoes of footsteps faded from the marble corridors, Ava lingered in a secluded alcove of the library. Drawn by a desire to document every curious detail for her research, she unfurled her notebook and settled by a narrow window that overlooked the inner courtyard. At first, there was only silence, punctuated by the soft sigh of the wind outside. But then, a delicate murmur reached her ears. It was as if 100 voices were speaking at once, their words indistinct and hushed, a language of rustling pages and gentle intonations that defied conventional speech. Ava's pulse quickened as she strained to listen. The sounds seemed to emanate from the rows of books themselves, as if they were engaged in secret conversation. Her eyes fell upon an ancient leather-bound volume resting on a shelf nearby. The title, embossed in gold on its worn cover, read The Codex of Shadows. As she stared, the book's pages fluttered as though stirred by an unseen breeze. In that moment, a single clear phrase emerged from the collective murmur. Remember the names. It was a command, a plea, and a promise all at once, a secret waiting to be unlocked. The following day, Ava combed through the library's catalogs and rare manuscripts, seeking any mention of the Codex of Shadows. Buried among records of medieval grimoires and ancient astrological treatises, She uncovered a reference to the manuscript in a brittle, handwritten ledger. The entry was cryptic. Within the library's heart, where ink and memory converge, lies the codex, a key to the silent voices. Heed the whispers, and the names of the forgotten shall reveal their stories. Intrigued, Ava felt an irresistible urge to locate the elusive manuscript. With the help of an elderly librarian named Mr. Carver, a man whose lined face and gentle eyes spoke of decades spent in quiet companionship with the library, she learned that the Codex of Shadows was not kept on public display. Instead, it resided in a hidden alcove deep within the library's restricted section, a place few dared to enter. One rainy afternoon, Mr. Carver led Ava through narrow, winding corridors behind locked doors and dusty staircases. In a small, secluded chamber, lit only by a single shaft of pale light piercing the gloom, lay a solitary pedestal. Resting atop it was the manuscript, its cover a tapestry of faded symbols and delicate silver script. Ava's heart pounded as she reached out to touch the ancient volume. In that moment, the whispers intensified, as if the very air was alive with anticipation. Back in her study room, with the manuscript open before her, Ava began to decipher its cryptic pages. The codex was written in an archaic dialect, one that fused forgotten languages in the subtle cadence of incantation. As she carefully transcribed the text, the pages seemed to pulse with an inner light, and the whispering voices from the library appeared to seep through the paper, intertwining with the words. The codex told the tale of the library's origin, a time when scholars and mystics sought to preserve the collective wisdom of the world. It recounted how during a period of great upheaval and loss, a coven of erudite mages and sorrowful scribes imbued the books with a fragment of their own souls. Their intent was noble, to ensure that the wisdom of their hearts would never be forgotten, even if their mortal lives faded into obscurity. And so, every book, every parchment, was given a spark of life, an eternal memory that could whisper its secrets to those who were willing to listen. Ava discovered that the whispers were more than mere echoes of the past. They were active expressions of the library's collective consciousness. The books, it seemed, were not static vessels of information, but living repositories of emotions, experiences, and even regrets. They whispered about lost loves, hidden betrayals, and moments of transcendent beauty. Each secret carried within the fragile pages was a testament to a life once lived, a story that demanded to be remembered. As the nights wore on, Ava found that the library's whispers grew increasingly personal. One particularly still night, while poring over the codex in the solitude of her study, she sensed a presence behind her. Slowly, she turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, a translucent, almost spectral form of a man in an old-fashioned suit, his eyes reflecting both sorrow and profound wisdom. "I am Elias," the apparition murmured, his voice barely louder than the rustle of turning pages. "I have been the keeper of these secrets for many decades." Elias, the ghost of the library's long-departed head librarian, explained that he had been bound to the Arcanum Athenaeum by a promise to guard the knowledge of the past and ensure that every whispered secret found its way into the hearts of those willing to listen. His spirit was neither malicious nor malevolent. Rather, it was filled with a quiet melancholy, born of endless duty and the weight of forgotten stories. Elias revealed that the library's enchantment was both a blessing and a curse. While it allowed the wisdom of the ages to be preserved and shared, it also carried the burden of countless sorrows. "The books cry out in the silence of the night," he said softly. "They seek remembrance, and they fear oblivion. It is through your kindness and curiosity that they may finally find peace." Haunted by Elias's revelation, Ava embarked on a journey through the library's vast archives, determined to uncover the full scope of its secrets. Each night, guided by the soft luminescence of candlelight, and the steady murmur of the books. She roamed the endless corridors. In forgotten alcoves and dusty recesses, she discovered letters of lost correspondence, diaries of ancient scholars, and even obscure treatises on metaphysical lore. One such discovery was a fragile diary belonging to a mysterious scribe named Lillian Blackthorne. In it, Lillian recounted her own encounters with the living library, a time when she too had heard the whispers of the books. The diary described how the text spoke of a hidden chamber, a place where the deepest secrets of the library were locked away. According to Lillian, this chamber held a relic, a quill fashioned from the feather of a mystical bird, capable of inscribing the truth of one's soul onto parchment. It was said that the quill could release the imprisoned memories of the library, offering a glimpse into the lives that had shaped its very essence. Ava's curiosity burned brighter than ever. Could this relic be the key to understanding the full extent of the library's power, and perhaps even to mending the sorrow that burdened its spirit? Determined to find out, she set out to locate the hidden chamber, guided by the cryptic clues scattered throughout Lillian's diary and the faint, persistent whispers of the books. Late one stormy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance and rain battered the ancient windows of the library, Ava discovered a narrow staircase concealed behind a tall shelf in one of the lesser-known stacks. With trembling hands, she descended into the depths of the building. The air grew cool and damp, heavy with the scent of aged parchment and moss. After what felt like an eternity of winding corridors, she emerged into a vast subterranean hall, its walls lined with rows of locked chests and sealed vaults. At the far end of the hall, partially obscured by shadows, stood a magnificent wooden door intricately carved with symbols that echoed the inscriptions of the Codex. Ava's heart pounded as she approached. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped into a small circular room, bathed in a soft, otherworldly light. In the center of the room, resting upon a pedestal of carved stone, lay the fabled quill. The quill shimmered with iridescent hues, emerald, sapphire, and amethyst, its delicate form contrasting with the weight of its legend. Ava knew in that moment that this relic was no ordinary writing tool. It was imbued with the collective memories of the library, the voices of every soul that had ever passed through its hallowed halls. Carefully, she reached out and grasped the quill. A surge of energy coursed through her, and in a vision as vivid as life itself, she saw flashes of long-forgotten stories. Love, loss, triumph, and despair woven together into a tapestry of human experience. Empowered by her discovery, Ava returned to the main reading room with the quill in hand. There, amidst the quiet chorus of whispering books, she began a delicate ritual. With reverence, she opened a blank, pristine parchment and allowed the quill to guide her hand. As she wrote, the whispers coalesced into coherent words, telling the story of the library's creation, the sacrifices of those who had poured their souls into its pages, and the eternal bond between knowledge and memory. The act of writing was transformative. As the quill danced across the page, the library's spectral inhabitants stirred more openly. Elias appeared once again, his eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. "You have given them voice," he said, his tone imbued with gratitude. "In your words, the lost are remembered, and their burdens are lifted, if only for a moment." Ava continued to write deep into the night, capturing every secret the library whispered, a litany of names, emotions, and histories that spanned centuries. With each stroke of the quill, the haunted library seemed to breathe more freely, as if the act of remembrance was a healing balm for its eternal wounds. In the days that followed, the atmosphere of the Arcanum Athenaeum shifted subtly yet irrevocably. The once mournful whispers took on a tone of gentle solace, and the spectral forms that roamed the corridors began to fade into a peaceful luminescence. The quill now returned to its pedestal in the hidden chamber, remained a silent testament to the power of shared memory and the art of storytelling. Ava's thesis, enriched by her extraordinary experiences, became a celebrated work that chronicled not only the secrets of the haunted library, but also the timeless interplay between loss and redemption. Scholars, artists, and curious souls from far and wide traveled to Eldersham to witness the living legacy of the Arcanum Athenaeum. They came seeking answers, solace, or simply the wonder of hearing a book whisper its secrets in the quiet of the night. Years later, as autumn leaves once again painted Eldersham in hues of gold and crimson, Ava often returned to the library. Now an established scholar, she was regarded as one of the few who had listened to the silent voices of the past and given them the dignity of remembrance. The Arcanum Athenaeum continued to stand as a beacon of knowledge and mystery, a place where books not only contained words but held entire worlds within their pages. In quiet corners of the library, where the light of day softened into twilight, one could still hear the faint murmur of pages turning and voices that spoke of ages gone by. For in that haunted sanctuary, every book was alive with secrets, every whisper a promise that no story would ever be forgotten. And so the legacy endured, a testament to the transformative power of memory and the eternal dance between the written word and the human soul. In that library where books whispered secrets in the hush of the night, every reader became a guardian of the past, ensuring that the voices of those long departed would live on, echoing softly through the corridors of time. Elena arrived in the town on a chilly autumn afternoon, the kind of day when the light seems to waver between certainty and illusion. The bus pulled up to what was labeled on the faded schedule as Briarwood Junction. But as Elena stepped off the vehicle, she was struck by an unsettling realization. Nothing was quite as it appeared. The town unfolded before her like a living map. Cobbled streets curving unpredictably, houses that leaned at peculiar angles, and lampposts that stood at odd intervals. At first glance, Briarwood Junction might have been dismissed as a quaint village. Yet Elena soon discovered that its charm was interwoven with mystery. For here, the very layout of the town was in constant flux. She overheard whispers among the locals, quiet, knowing murmurs about how the streets sometimes shuffle, as if by their own volition, rearranging themselves under the cloak of night. Though perplexed, Elena felt an inexplicable pull toward this strange place. With a backpack filled with a few belongings and a heart eager for adventure, she made her way toward the town center, unaware that every step she took was leading her into a labyrinth of secrets. That first night, as dusk deepened into a heavy, velvety dark, Elena found shelter in a modest inn on the edge of town. The inn's lobby was warmly lit, and its walls were lined with maps and sketches of Briarwood Junction, as it had been supposedly before the mysterious changes began. An elderly clerk named Mr. Abernathy, whose eyes held both mischief and melancholy, explained in hushed tones that the streets of this town were unlike any other. Every night as the moon climbs high, the town reconfigures itself, he said. The main road might lead to the market one night, only to find itself ending at a dead alley by morning. It's as if Briarwood has a will of its own. Elena listened intently, her mind racing with questions. How could a town change like this? Was it some elaborate trick, a relic of old superstition, or something far more profound? That night, unable to sleep, she crept out of the inn and wandered the narrow lanes, noticing with both wonder and trepidation that the familiar corners and intersections she passed by earlier now appeared altered, as if they had been gently rearranged while she slept. The following morning, over a cup of bitter coffee in a small cafe, Elena struck up a conversation with a weathered local named Thomas. He was a man whose life had been intertwined with Briarwood's every secret for decades. Between sips, Thomas recounted the town's peculiar history. It's said that many generations ago, Briarwood was built on the site of an ancient settlement, a place of rituals and change. Legend holds that an enigmatic force, sometimes called the architect, blessed or cursed the town with eternal metamorphosis. The streets you see are not fixed, they are echoes of old memories, pathways that shift as time itself reorders the past and future. Thomas's words painted vivid images of midnight processions, of candlelit figures converging at crossroads to honor or mourn events lost to time. Elena could scarcely believe it. A town where the streets moved as if drawn by an unseen hand. Yet in his tone and the gentle nod of agreement from nearby patrons, there was a tangible sincerity that made her wonder if the mystery was rooted in something ancient and real. Determined to learn more, Elena began exploring Briarwood by day and night. She discovered that the town's residents had adapted to the nightly changes with a mixture of resignation and quiet pride. There were local maps, hand-drawn and annotated with careful notes, that chronicled the unpredictable shifts. In one faded map, a network of streets was drawn with arrows and symbols indicating the way they run at midnight, as if the town were a living puzzle to be solved. One evening, Elena was invited to a small gathering at the home of Miss Evelyn, an elderly woman renowned for her deep knowledge of Briarwood's lore. By the flicker of candlelight and the soft murmur of neighbors sharing stories, Miss Evelyn recounted tales passed down through the generations. They say that long ago, when the town was first founded, a mysterious benefactor designed it as a sanctuary for wandering soul, she explained. The streets change not to confound, but to protect. They create hidden paths that lead the lost to safety, and sometimes even reveal secret truths about one's destiny. Yet be warned, those who try to map them too rigidly may find that some secrets are meant to remain forever elusive. As the evening deepened, Elena felt both comforted and unsettled by the notion that Briarwood was a town in perpetual motion, a place where change was not only inevitable, but also necessary for its survival. With her curiosity now fully ignited, Elena embarked on a personal quest to understand the mechanism behind the shifting streets. One crisp night, armed with a notebook and a camera, she set out to trace the pathways that had once been familiar and now lay transformed. The streets under the pale glow of street lamps became a surreal tapestry of light and shadow. Every intersection seemed to lead to multiple possible destinations, and landmarks like the old clock tower and the ivy-clad library appeared in different places with each step. As she wandered deeper into the town, Elena encountered a narrow alley that, just moments before, had led her to the town square. Instead, it now opened into a hidden courtyard overgrown with wildflowers and vines. In the center of the courtyard stood a stone bench inscribed with runes that glowed faintly. She sat for a moment, absorbing the atmosphere, a potent mix of history, mystery, and an almost palpable sense of magic. In her journal, she scribbled observations of how the very geometry of the town seemed to bend and twist, almost as if the streets were breathing, exhaling memories of what once was and what could be again. The realization struck her that Briarwood was not merely a town with erratic street patterns. It was a living, shifting labyrinth designed to challenge its inhabitants to think beyond fixed boundaries. One night, after following a series of clues that had emerged from old maps and whispered local legends, Elena discovered a narrow passageway hidden behind the town hall. The passage was marked by an archaic symbol carved into a weathered stone, a symbol that resembled an open eye surrounded by intricate patterns. The doorway led her down a spiral staircase into the very heart of Briarwood's mystery. In a subterranean chamber lit by the soft glow of phosphorescent moss, Elena found a collection of relics, dusty manuscripts, ornate tools, and a massive, intricately designed mechanism that looked as if it were part clockwork and part arcane device. At the center of the chamber, upon a pedestal, lay an ancient tablet inscribed with verses in a language long forgotten. As Elena traced her fingers over the symbols, she felt a surge of understanding, a connection between the shifting streets above and the deep history of the town. The chamber, which locals referred to in hushed tones as the architect's chamber, was rumored to be the origin of the nightly transformations. It was said that an ancient force, personified in local legend as the architect, had imbued Briarwood with the power to reinvent itself each night. The tablet hinted at a ritual, a cycle of renewal designed to protect the town from stagnation and decay. Elena realized that the shifting streets were not a mere quirk of nature, but a deliberate, almost sacred feature of Briarwood's identity. In the days that followed her discovery, Elena sought to piece together the scattered fragments of Briarwood's past. With the help of old maps, the recollections of elderly residents, and the cryptic inscriptions from the architect's chamber, she began to understand that the nightly reordering was part of a larger cycle, a living reminder that nothing in life is permanent, and that renewal often comes at the price of the familiar. Her research revealed that the town had been founded centuries ago by a group of settlers fleeing turmoil in their homeland. They had come upon this strange land where, legend had it, the earth itself pulsed with a mysterious energy. To safeguard their community, they had performed a ritual, a pact with an unseen force that promised protection as long as the town remained ever-changing. Over time, the original meaning of the ritual had been lost, yet its effect endured in the shifting streets and the ever-adaptive spirit of the town. Late one night, while Elena sat by the light of a single lantern on a quiet street that momentarily resembled a familiar route home, she experienced a profound vision. In the vision, she saw a figure cloaked in flowing robes standing at an intersection of impossibly twisting roads. The figure's eyes shone with an ancient wisdom, and a soft voice whispered, "Embrace change, for in each new path lies the promise of discovery. The streets are not meant to trap you. They are meant to guide you to what you seek." This vision transformed Elena's understanding. No longer did she view the shifting streets as obstacles to be overcome. Rather, she began to see them as invitations to explore, to learn, and to grow. The town, with its unpredictable paths, was a metaphor for life itself, ever-changing, sometimes bewildering, yet full of unexpected beauty. As Elena delved deeper into the mysteries of Briarwood, she encountered a growing number of residents who, like her, were curious about the town's true nature. A small circle of seekers began meeting in secret, a group comprised of local historians, artists, and even a few skeptical scientists, all determined to decode the enigma of the ever-shifting streets. In these gatherings, ideas flowed freely. Some believed that if they could decipher the ancient tablet found in the architect's chamber, they might one day control the shifts, guiding the town to a more stable future. Others argued that the beauty of Briarwood lay in its unpredictability, and that any attempt to force order upon it would rob the town of its soul. Elena found herself caught between these viewpoints, her heart torn by the desire to preserve the town's enchanting mystery and the longing to provide certainty for its residents. Late one night, as the group gathered in the shadow of the old clock tower, a structure that itself seemed to change its face with every passing hour, Elena proposed a daring idea. "What if," she began hesitantly, "we embrace the change instead of resisting it? Perhaps by understanding the cycles of the streets, we can learn to navigate not only the town, but our own lives more gracefully." Her words resonated with the others, sparking a passionate debate that lasted deep into the night. In that moment, Elena realized that Briarwood was teaching them a lesson far greater than the rearrangement of roads. It was teaching them that change is both inevitable and essential, a force that, when understood and accepted, can lead to growth, renewal, and even transformation. In the weeks that followed, the town of Briarwood began to witness subtle shifts in its atmosphere. Rather than viewing the nightly reordering as a nuisance or an enigma to be solved, the townspeople gradually came to celebrate it as a symbol of their resilience and adaptability. Local businesses adjusted their hours, and community events were planned with the understanding that no street would ever be exactly the same from one day to the next. Elena, now regarded as a bridge between the old legends and the new reality, became an active participant in guiding this transformation. With the help of her newfound friends and the wisdom gleaned from the architect's chamber, she organized public forums where residents could share their experiences and insights about the shifting streets. These meetings fostered a sense of unity and creativity as people began to see the town not as a fixed place, but as a dynamic canvas upon which life was constantly being rewritten. One clear night, as the town gathered in the central square, a space that, on this occasion, had transformed into a radiant, open plaza, an unexpected phenomenon occurred. The streets converged, if only for a fleeting moment, into a perfect, symmetrical layout. In that ephemeral instant, the town seemed to hold its breath. Then, as if released from a spell, the roads resumed their erratic dance, scattering in every direction once more. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the townspeople erupted into applause and cheers, celebrating the fleeting glimpse of order as a reminder that even in perpetual change, moments of clarity and beauty could be found. It was a reaffirmation of their collective spirit, a living testament to the idea that the journey itself, with all its twists and turns, was what made life worth living. As months turned into years, Briarwood's reputation grew far and wide, a town famed not for its static landmarks, but for its ability to reinvent itself night after night. Travelers, artists, and scholars flocked to witness the phenomenon firsthand, each drawn by the promise of discovery and the allure of a place where the familiar was always just out of reach. Elena, whose own journey had transformed her from a curious outsider to a beloved chronicler of the town's lore, penned her experiences in a series of essays and a long, contemplative book. In her writings, she captured the essence of Briarwood, the ephemeral beauty of its shifting streets, the resilience of its people, and the timeless lessons that change, while sometimes disconcerting, was the very heartbeat of existence. In quiet moments when she walked the cobbled lanes that still defied expectation, Elena would recall that mysterious vision of the robed figure at the twisting crossroads. She now understood that the figure had not been a harbinger of doom, but rather a gentle reminder that every new path held within it the promise of renewal and endless possibility. Briarwood endured as a living parable, a town where the streets change places each night, yet the spirit of its people remained steadfast. The mystery of its shifting roads became a metaphor for life itself, unpredictable, sometimes chaotic, yet always offering the chance for reinvention. In Briarwood, no one ever truly lost their way. Rather, each twist and turn was an invitation to discover a new aspect of oneself, a new perspective on what it meant to belong. Generations later, children would grow up hearing the tale of the town that danced with the night, a story of courage, wonder, and the beauty of embracing change. And in every corner of Briarwood, whether in a quiet alley or beneath the arching boughs of ancient trees, the legacy of perpetual transformation lived on, a reminder that in the grand tapestry of existence, every street, every path is ever-changing, just as the hearts that travel them are. Thus, in a town where the streets change places, life was not measured by the distance between fixed points, but by the endless journey of discovery, a journey that, like the shifting roads, was as unpredictable as it was infinitely beautiful. On the outskirts of the quiet town of Halcyon, where the mist clings to ancient oaks and time seems to move at a languid pace, lay the old Greenwood Cemetery. It was a place shrouded in mystery, its weathered headstones and crumbling mausoleums bearing silent witness to centuries of forgotten lives. Among the many relics of the departed, one tombstone stood apart, a slab of dark granite ornate yet unsettling, known among locals as the Changing Stone. Legend had it that every night, as the veil between the living and the dead grew thin, the inscription on this tombstone would alter itself. One evening it might bear the name of a long-forgotten wanderer, the next the moniker of a disgraced noble, and yet another night a name unknown to any living soul. Whispers about the stone spread like wildfire, drawing curious visitors, grief-stricken relatives, and even hardened skeptics into its spectral orbit. Evelyn Moore, a determined historian with a passion for local lore, had grown up listening to her grandmother's tales of Greenwood Cemetery. Despite its eerie reputation, Evelyn felt an inexplicable pull toward its mysteries. One crisp autumn evening, armed with her notebook and a keen sense of wonder, she ventured into the cemetery. The silver light of a waning moon illuminated rows of weathered gravestones, and an eerie silence hung in the air. Near the heart of the cemetery, hidden by a cluster of ancient yews, she found the Changing Stone. Its surface was smooth and cold to the touch, etched with symbols that hinted at arcane knowledge. As she approached, Evelyn noticed something extraordinary. The inscription that had greeted her earlier that day was no longer the same. Last night, it had read Edmund Blackwood, a name that resonated with local history. Now, under the ghostly moonlight, it shimmered into a different name. Aurelia Fairmont. Evelyn's heart quickened. Was it a trick of the shifting light, or had she stumbled upon something far more profound? Determined to document every detail, she took careful notes and a series of photographs, unaware that she had just taken the first step into a labyrinth of secrets that spanned both time and the supernatural. The following days found Evelyn immersed in research at the town's modest library. Dusty ledgers, forgotten diaries, and yellowed newspaper clippings slowly painted a portrait of Greenwood Cemetery's storied past. Each reference to the Changing Stone was accompanied by accounts of inexplicable phenomena. Mournful whispers, fleeting apparitions, and moments when the boundary between this world and the next seemed to blur into nothingness. One faded article mentioned that a local family, the Blackwoods, had once been prominent patrons of the town. Their legacy, however, was marred by tragedy and scandal, and as time passed, the family's name faded into obscurity. Yet every now and then, the Changing Stone would bear the Blackwood name, as if calling them back to a history that refused to die. And then there were other names. Names of people who had no place in any official record. Names that seemed to come from a different time entirely. Evelyn's research led her to interview elderly residents who recalled strange experiences in the cemetery. "I've seen it myself," murmured Mr. Rowland, a retired school teacher with silver hair and eyes full of wistful sorrow. "One night, I swear, I saw the stone change before my eyes. It's as if the dead are trying to tell us something, or perhaps ask for our help." His voice trembled with a mixture of fear and awe, leaving Evelyn to wonder. Were these spectral inscriptions a plea for recognition or a curse that bound the restless souls to the stone? As the days shortened and the crisp chill of winter crept into the air, Evelyn resolved to spend a night by the Changing Stone. With a journal, a lantern, and a resolve steeled by curiosity, she returned to Greenwood Cemetery under a sky laden with stars. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through dead leaves. She settled on a nearby bench, her eyes fixed on the stone as midnight approached. As the clock struck 12, the temperature dropped abruptly, the air shimmered, and the tombstone's inscription began to writhe, as though animated by an unseen hand. In a slow, deliberate transformation, the name Aurelia Fairmont dissolved into swirling letters, only to reassemble into Julian Crestwood. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she scribbled down the new name, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. Then, as quickly as it had changed, the name shifted again. One moment it read Julian Crestwood, the next Catherine Sinclair. a name that sent a chill through her very soul. The spectral glow of the stone deepened, and she sensed that this was no mere natural phenomenon. It was a window into the lives of those long departed, each name a story waiting to be told. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn began to notice a disturbing pattern. The names on the tombstone were not random. They appeared to follow an ancient sequence, a roster of souls entwined by a mysterious curse. Some nights the name was that of a forgotten poet, whose verses had once stirred hearts and then faded into obscurity. Other nights it was the name of a woman whose life had been cut short by an unspeakable tragedy. With each change, Evelyn felt the weight of these lost lives pressing upon her. Haunted by dreams of the individuals whose names appeared on the stone, she started experiencing eerie visions. In these dreams, she would see fleeting images of a young man with sorrowful eyes, a woman in elegant attire wandering a desolate corridor, and a child whose face was a blur of innocence and despair. Each vision was accompanied by a soft whisper, a plea that seemed to echo from the very depths of the past. "Remember us," they said, their voices melding into a mournful chorus. Determined to understand the connection between the changing names in these apparitions, Evelyn sought the counsel of Father Benedict, the local priest known for his knowledge of both scripture and folklore. In the cool, candlelit quiet of the church's confessional, he listened intently to her account. "There are legends," Father Benedict intoned gravely, "of a curse placed upon this land many centuries ago. They say that the tombstone was crafted by a grief-stricken artisan, one who lost his entire family in a great calamity. In his anguish, he imbued the stone with a fragment of his sorrow, so that every night it would echo the names of those whose lives were unjustly taken or forgotten. It is both a memorial and a curse, a reminder that time does not heal all wounds, and that the dead still call out for recognition." Evelyn, fueled by a blend of fear, fascination, and compassion, embarked on a quest to trace the origins of the curse. She pored over ancient manuscripts and local legends, piecing together fragments of a narrative that spanned generations. The more she learned, the clearer it became that the changing stone was not merely a passive marker of death, but an active conduit for the unresolved sorrows of the past. Her research led her to an abandoned estate on the edge of Halcyon, once owned by the artisan whose name had been lost to time. The estate, now a crumbling relic of faded grandeur, was said to hold secrets of its own. Within its decaying walls, she uncovered diaries and letters chronicling the artisan's descent into madness after the tragic loss of his family. In one particularly harrowing entry, he wrote of a ritual he had performed in a desperate attempt to preserve the memory of his loved ones, a ritual that inadvertently bound their souls to the stone he had carved. Evelyn felt a profound sadness as she read his final words. The artisan's heartache had been so immense that it transformed into an eternal lament, forever echoing through the names on the changing stone. His legacy was a reminder that grief, when left unacknowledged, could take on a life of its own. One cold moonlit night, with her resolve strengthened by her discoveries, Evelyn returned to Greenwood Cemetery. The air was crisp and unnervingly still, as if the very world held its breath in anticipation. As midnight neared, she watched the tombstone intently, waiting for the next transformation. This time, as the hands of the clock aligned, the stone began to glow with an ethereal light. The inscription melted away and reformed into the name Isabel Ravenscroft. Almost immediately, a figure emerged from the shadowed periphery, a woman in mourning attire, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. Unlike the spectral images of her dreams, this apparition was solid, her presence radiating a quiet, melancholic grace. "Isabel," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling as if in the presence of a long-lost friend. The ghostly woman's gaze softened, and she raised a delicate hand as if to beckon Evelyn closer. In that silent exchange, a torrent of emotions passed between them, a silent plea for remembrance, for closure, and for release from an unending cycle of grief. Isabel's apparition spoke not with words but with emotions that surged through Evelyn's mind. She saw flashes of a life filled with joy, sudden tragedy, and an eventual descent into despair. Evelyn understood that Isabel was trapped in a loop of sorrow, her identity fading with each passing night until she was reduced to nothing more than a name on a stone. Realizing that the only way to break the curse was to honor the lost souls and grant them the remembrance they so desperately sought, Evelyn began to devise a ritual, a ceremony that would symbolically release the trapped spirits and perhaps mend the fractured fabric of the past. She consulted with Father Benedict once more, who agreed that the act of true remembrance, combined with an earnest offering of forgiveness and love, might serve as a key to unlocking the bonds that tethered the dead to the stone. Together, they gathered relics of the past, old letters, photographs, personal mementos, and arranged them at the base of the changing stone in a small makeshift memorial. That night, as the chill of winter seeped into the marrow of the earth, they performed the ritual beneath a canopy of stars. Evelyn recited verses of remembrance and sorrow, her voice resonant with empathy and hope, while Father Benedict intoned ancient prayers of release. As the ritual reached its zenith, the air around the stone began to shimmer. The names on the tombstone danced in a feverish light before dissolving entirely, replaced by a single inscription, "Forever Remembered." In that moment, a palpable stillness fell over the cemetery. The spectral apparitions that had haunted the grounds appeared one last time, their expressions peaceful, their eyes filled with gratitude. It was as if, for the first time in centuries, the dead had been truly acknowledged, and in that acknowledgement found solace. In the days that followed, Greenwood Cemetery underwent a subtle transformation. The oppressive weight of the curse that had long hung over the grounds seemed to lift, replaced by a gentle calm. Visitors who came to pay their respects found that the eerie phenomenon of the changing names was no more. In its place stood the solitary inscription, "Forever Remembered," a silent promise that the dead would not be forgotten. Evelyn, too, felt a profound shift within herself. Her journey had been one of sorrow and discovery, a testament to the healing power of compassion and remembrance. Though the ghosts of the past had receded into the quiet corners of memory, their stories remained etched in her heart, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of grief. Father Benedict continued his ministry in Halcyon, his sermons enriched by the shared experience of the cemetery's transformation. The ritual had not only released the trapped souls, but had also rekindled a sense of community among the living, a collective acknowledgement that every life, however brief or painful, contributed to the tapestry of history. Years passed, and Greenwood Cemetery slowly transformed into a place of quiet beauty rather than dread. Families came to visit the memorial, leaving behind tokens of love and loss. And the stone that once changed names became a cherished relic, a symbol of the delicate balance between memory and oblivion. Evelyn dedicated herself to chronicling the stories of those whose names had once appeared on the changing stone. In a series of heartfelt essays and meticulously researched books, she wove together the narratives of the forgotten souls, ensuring that their lives and losses would remain a part of the collective memory of Halcyon. Her work touched many, reminding the town that remembrance was not merely an act of mourning, but a celebration of the lives that had shaped its history. In quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the ancient trees and the twilight lingered a little longer than it once had, Evelyn would stand before the tombstone and read the names of the departed aloud. Each uttered syllable was a promise, a pledge to honor the past and to carry forward the lessons of love, loss, and redemption. Long after the ritual that freed the restless spirits, the legacy of the changing stone endured. Greenwood Cemetery became a sanctuary for the grieving and a beacon for those seeking to understand the inexorable ties between life and death. The inscription, "Forever Remembered," was etched not only in stone, but also in the hearts of the townspeople. A daily reminder that every life, no matter how brief, deserved to be cherished and acknowledged. Evelyn's writings continued to inspire future generations. New scholars, poets, and artists found solace in her work, their own creations echoing the themes of loss, memory, and the transformative power of empathy. And on quiet nights when the sky was filled with stars and the world hushed into stillness, one could almost hear a soft murmur among the graves, a gentle chorus affirming that the dead, though silent, were forever a part of the living. In the end, the tombstone that once changed names every night had become a symbol of hope and renewal. It taught those who dared to listen that remembrance was not a curse but a gift, a means by which the past could guide the present and illuminate the uncertain path toward tomorrow. And as long as hearts continued to remember, no soul would ever be truly lost. Thus concludes the chronicle of a tombstone that changed names every night, a tale of sorrow and redemption, of restless spirits and the healing power of remembrance. In Greenwood Cemetery, where the dead and the living met in the quiet twilight of memory, every name was a story, and every story a reminder that love and loss are the threads that bind us all together in the tapestry of life. In a land shrouded by myth and memory, beyond the edges of familiar maps, there lay a forest that defied the natural order. Locals in the nearby hamlet of Blackwood spoke in hushed tones of a place where the sun had long abandoned the sky, and the veil between day and night was forever torn asunder. They called it the Nocturne Grove, a forest where night never ended. For generations, the people of Blackwood had nurtured an uneasy respect for the forest's dark majesty. Elders recounted eerie legends of travelers lured by ethereal voices, of strange, glowing lights dancing among ancient trees, and of secrets hidden beneath layers of perpetual twilight. No one dared venture too deep, for it was said that within the forest, time was a forgotten concept and hope was as elusive as the first rays of dawn. Elias Marlowe, a restless scholar with an insatiable curiosity for the unexplained, had grown up captivated by the lore of Nocturne Grove. His nights were filled with dreams of silvered branches and whispered secrets, and by day he pored over brittle manuscripts and faded maps in search of clues to the forest's origins. Elias believed that somewhere within the endless night lay not only the answers to ancient curses and forgotten rites, but also a path to understanding the human heart's deepest yearnings. After years of meticulous research, he discovered a long-forgotten journal written by a wayward traveler, a man who had vanished into the grove centuries ago. The journal detailed a journey into the heart of darkness, speaking of a luminous glade where sorrow and beauty mingled in an eternal waltz. With every word, Elias felt the pull of destiny. The forest was calling him to uncover its mysteries and perhaps to heal the silent wounds of his own past. On a cool autumn evening, beneath a sky burdened with dense, low-hanging clouds, Elias set out for Nocturne Grove. The path from Blackwood was narrow and treacherous, winding between rugged hills and mist-laden meadows. As he approached the forest's edge, the temperature dropped abruptly, and a strange hush fell over the land. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath in reverence of the darkness ahead. The boundary of the forest was marked by towering oaks and ancient pines, their gnarled limbs reaching skyward like pleading hands. Elias hesitated at the threshold, his heart pounding with both trepidation and anticipation. He stepped forward, crossing into a realm where the familiar gave way to the uncanny, a place where every shadow whispered its own secret and every rustle of leaves felt like a distant lullaby of sorrow. Inside Nocturne Grove, time lost its meaning. The sky above was a perpetual canopy of deep indigo, punctured only by countless pinpricks of distant cold starlight. The forest floor, carpeted in moss and lichen, glowed with a subtle bioluminescence that lent the world an otherworldly quality. Here the night was not merely an absence of light, but a living presence, an all-encompassing shroud that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of forgotten ages. Elias wandered through the labyrinthine woods, each step taking him deeper into a realm where familiar rules did not apply. Trees whispered ancient incantations as the wind danced through their leaves, and in the distance the soft sound of running water hinted at secrets hidden in the darkness. Every rustle, every flicker of movement sparked his imagination with both wonder and unease. In this forest, he was both intruder and pilgrim, an inquisitive soul drawn to the unknown. As days melted into an indistinguishable continuum of twilight, Elias began to notice signs that he was not alone. At first, it was only the faint echo of footsteps and the quiet murmur of voices that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the trees. Then one evening, while resting by a small crystal-clear stream, he saw them, shimmering figures moving silently among the shadows. These were the denizens of Nocturne Grove, spectral forms that glided through the underbrush as if weightless, their eyes glowing softly in the eternal night. Some appeared as ethereal children, their laughter a fragile melody lost on the wind. Others bore the solemn expressions of ancient guardians, their presence commanding both respect and sorrow. Their voices, sometimes a gentle murmur, at other times a plaintive wail, formed a chorus of lost souls, each note imbued with stories of love, loss, and unfulfilled destiny. Elias felt an inexplicable kinship with these spectral wanderers. Their silent communion with the forest spoke to the same longing he carried in his heart, a yearning to transcend the boundaries of mortal existence and touch something eternal. With each passing night, the spirits drew nearer, their presence both a comfort and a warning of the depths of darkness that lay within the grove. Driven by a growing compulsion, Elias pressed onward until he reached a clearing unlike any he had seen before. In the center of this glade, a circle of ancient stones encircled a shallow pond that mirrored the unchanging night sky. The air was thick with a palpable melancholy, as if the very earth mourned a forgotten tragedy. It was here, by the pond's edge, that Elias encountered a figure whose sorrow cut through the perpetual darkness like a shard of light. A woman clad in tattered robes that shimmered with dew stood silently by the water. Her eyes, deep pools of despair and longing, met his, and in that moment, Elias understood that she was the guardian of this hallowed place, the embodiment of the forest's eternal lament. "I am Seraphine," she whispered, her voice soft yet resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "I guard the memories of those who lost their way in this endless night. You have come seeking answers, but know that here, every truth comes at a price." Seraphine explained that the forest was cursed long ago by a grief-stricken deity who had wept for a lost love, condemning the land to perpetual twilight as a reminder of eternal sorrow. The curse was not merely a darkness cast upon the woods, but a living tapestry woven from the memories of all who had suffered. Every spirit, every whisper of wind was a thread in this intricate fabric of despair and beauty. In the days that followed, Seraphine became both guide and enigma to Elias. She led him through secret pathways and ancient groves where the past seemed to live again. Together they uncovered relics and ruins, crumbling temples overgrown with ivy, weathered stone altars marked with symbols of mourning, and faded murals depicting a forgotten epic of love and sacrifice. Each discovery deepened Elias's understanding of the forest's dual nature. The endless night was not merely a prison of darkness, but a repository of memories, a living chronicle of every lost soul and every broken promise. The forest itself was a testament to the inexorable passage of time, a realm where every sorrow and every joy was preserved in eternal twilight. Late one evening, beneath the cold gaze of a crescent moon, Elias uncovered an inscription etched into the base of an ancient obelisk. The cryptic words spoke of a ritual, one that could either break the curse or bind the forest power to a single unyielding fate. The ritual demanded a sacrifice of the heart, a relinquishment of all that one held dear, in exchange for the restoration of light. The revelation of the ritual tormented Elias. His journey had been fueled by the desire to understand and perhaps liberate the forest. Yet the cost was more profound than he had ever imagined. To restore the cycle of day and night, one must surrender the essence of one's soul, the very core that gave life to hope, love, and memory. As the realization sank in, Elias wrestled with the duality of his mission. Could he, in good conscience, forsake the beauty of the night, the whispered secrets, the spectral chorus, the profound connection to souls long past, in favor of a return to the mundane light of day? The forest had changed him. It had shown him that even in endless night, there was a strange and haunting splendor. Haunted by this internal conflict, Elias spent sleepless nights by the pond in the glade of lament, seeking counsel from Seraphine. The guardian's eyes, full of ageless sorrow, bore witness to the sacrifices of countless wanderers. The curse was born of love and loss, she murmured one night, her voice trembling with both regret and resignation. To undo it, you must be willing to let go of the very things that define you. Only then can the cycle of night and day be restored. Determined to confront the inevitable, Elias resolved to perform the ritual at the ancient stone circle at the heart of the forest. Under a sky devoid of dawn, with the spectral chorus of lost souls as his only witness, he prepared to offer his own heart as the sacrifice. Seraphine gathered sacred relics and recited incantations passed down through the ages, her voice merging with the rustle of the wind and the distant murmur of ancient trees. In a moment of transcendent clarity, Elias closed his eyes and summoned all the memories that had defined his existence. Moments of joy, pain, love, and loss. With trembling hands, he placed a token of his past, a locket containing a faded photograph of a lost beloved, at the center of the circle. As the incantation reached its crescendo, a shimmering light erupted from the locket, and the boundaries of the forest quivered as if in response to his sacrifice. Time itself seemed to pause. The spectral forms around him grew still, their luminous eyes fixed on the unfolding miracle. Elias felt a profound emptiness, a void where his heart had once beat with unyielding passion and hope. In that suspended moment, he wondered whether the price of restoration was too high, whether the restoration of the world above would come at the cost of all the haunting beauty he had come to cherish. As the ritual reached its zenith, a sound like the first distant chime of morning bells echoed through the eternal night. The stones of the circle began to hum, and a radiant glow pulsed from the obelisk, illuminating the forest in a soft, otherworldly light. One by one, the shadows of the grove trembled and shifted, as if acknowledging the long-awaited end of their eternal vigil. Seraphine's eyes glistened with both sorrow and hope. "The curse is lifting," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising chorus of nature reborn. "But remember, the price of light is the memory of the night." Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the dense indigo canopy above began to lighten. A pale luminescence crept in from the horizon, a promise of dawn after endless darkness. The spectral figures, who had wandered the forest for centuries, paused in their silent vigil. Their forms shimmered with bitter-sweet resignation, caught between the fading twilight of their existence and the uncertain radiance of a new day. Elias, feeling both the loss and the liberation of his sacrifice, opened his eyes to behold the miraculous transformation. The forest, once trapped in the depths of perpetual night, now welcomed the tender glow of early morning. The weight of sorrow, the burden of memories preserved in eternal twilight, began to lift as the cycle of life resumed its natural rhythm. The days that followed were surreal, a gentle merging of night and day as the forest adjusted to its newfound balance. In certain corners of Nocturne Grove, the night still lingered, a delicate remnant of what once was, while other parts flourished in the soft light of dawn. The curse had been broken, yet the echoes of the endless night remained like a bittersweet memory etched into every leaf and stone. Elias emerged from the heart of the forest forever changed. He had sacrificed a piece of his soul, yet in doing so had restored a natural order that had been long denied. With Seraphine by his side, now no longer a spectral guardian, but a living memory of what had been, the two became custodians of the forest's legacy. They tended to the balance between light and darkness, ensuring that the eternal night would be remembered not as a prison, but as a chapter in a story that celebrated both sorrow and redemption. Years later, the legend of Nocturne Grove continued to inspire awe and wonder. Travelers and seekers of truth would journey to the forest not solely in search of the breaking of curses, but to witness the delicate interplay of light and dark. A reminder that even in the absence of the sun, beauty and hope could be found in unexpected places. In the village of Blackwood, elders recounted the tale of Elias Marlowe and the forest where night had once reigned without end. They spoke of the ritual performed at the ancient stone circle, of a sacrifice that had restored the balance between memory and renewal. And on quiet mornings, when the mist still clung to the treetops and the first tender rays of light filtered through the canopy, one could almost hear a soft melody, a tribute to the souls who had danced in the eternal twilight, and to the resilient heart that dared to bridge the gap between night and day. The forest, forever transformed, yet still echoing with the mystique of its former curse, became a living testament to the power of sacrifice, the inevitability of change, and the enduring beauty of memories. For in every rustling leaf and every gentle ray of dawn, there lay the promise that even the darkest night would eventually give way to light, and that within that light, the shadows of the past would forever remind us of the fragility and wonder of the human spirit. Thus ends the tale of a forest where night never ends, a story of endless twilight, of secrets whispered among ancient trees, and of the price one pays to restore the natural order of the world. In that mystical grove, where sorrow and beauty coexisted in delicate harmony, the legacy of eternal night became a cherished memory, a timeless reminder that every ending, however dark, paves the way for a new beginning. In the sleepy town of Marrow's End, where the fog clings to crooked lanes and secrets hide in every shadow, an unassuming antique shop stood at the corner of a forgotten street. Its windows, draped in layers of dust and time, hinted at treasures from eras long past. It was here that Julian Merrick, a quiet and introspective musician with a penchant for old legends, discovered an object that would change his life forever. Julian had spent many a rainy afternoon rummaging through relics, each item whispering its own tale of faded grandeur and sorrowful memory. One such day, as the autumn chill crept through the narrow streets, he found himself in the attic of the shop, a cramped space filled with forgotten memorabilia. Amid cracked, leather-bound books and tarnished silverware lay a small wooden case, its surface carved with intricate symbols that pulsed faintly under his touch. Inside, nestled upon a bed of delicate moss, rested a slender, antique flute, its silver surface etched with cryptic runes. An unnameable pull urged him closer. Although the instrument looked fragile, it radiated an aura of profound melancholy and mystery. The air around it was heavy, as if burdened by memories too deep for the living to recall. Without fully understanding why, Julian felt compelled to purchase the flute, a decision that would soon draw him into a world where the veil between the living and the dead was perilously thin. That very night, Julian retreated to his modest apartment on the edge of town. The room was filled with relics of his past, a grand piano that had seen better days, stacks of sheet music, and photographs of a life that felt like a fading echo. In the quiet solitude, he carefully unwrapped the mysterious flute. As he held it, a chill traversed his spine. Its weight was both literal and metaphorical, a reminder of burdens carried by those who had long since departed. Unable to resist its call, Julian raised the flute to his lips. The first note emerged hesitantly, a sound that was both haunting and exquisite, carrying with it an air of longing. The melody seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of the night. Outside, the wind paused as if to listen, and the streetlights flickered in sympathetic response. But something extraordinary happened. In the wavering candlelight, shadows in the corner of the room began to stir. At first, they appeared as mere ripples on the wall, a subtle distortion in the darkness. Then, with each note Julian played, the shapes sharpened. Pale, spectral forms emerged, their features blurred and indistinct, yet filled with a sorrow that transcended mortal grief. They drifted closer, drawn to the hypnotic cadence of the flute. The following days brought unsettling changes to Julian's life. The once ordinary apartment now thrummed with an undercurrent of otherworldly energy. Each time he played the flute, more spirits appeared, figures from eras long past, with eyes full of unfulfilled desires and regrets. Some hovered near the doorways, silent and watchful. Others materialized behind him in the mirror, their expressions pleading for deliverance. Night after night, the same ethereal chorus accompanied his music. He began to realize that the flute was no ordinary instrument. It was a beacon, a conduit between the living world and the afterlife. Its notes lured the spirits from the shadows, drawing them into a realm where they could once again be heard, if only for a fleeting moment. In his desperation to understand this phenomenon, Julian delved into dusty tomes and obscure manuscripts at the local library. He discovered fragments of lore that spoke of a cursed instrument, forged in sorrow and imbued with a power beyond mortal ken. According to ancient texts, such a flute was crafted by a forgotten artisan whose own grief had birthed a means to commune with those who had passed on. But with that communion came a heavy price. Each note played summoned not only memories of the departed, but also the weight of their unfinished stories and bitter regrets. One stormy evening, as rain battered the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance, Julian decided to perform a more deliberate experiment. Seated before an old phonograph, he placed the flute upon a velvet cushion and allowed his trembling fingers to trace its carvings. In the flickering lamplight, he recalled the passages from an ancient manuscript that hinted at the flute's origins. The text spoke of Alistair Crane, a once celebrated musician whose heart had been shattered by betrayal and loss. In a desperate bid to reclaim the voices of his dearly departed, Alistair had crafted a unique instrument, one that could beckon spirits from the other side. Yet as the spirits poured forth, their overwhelming presence began to erode the boundary between life and death. Alistair's mind, unable to bear the constant onslaught of spectral sorrow, had been consumed by madness. Legend held that he vanished one fateful night, leaving behind only the cursed flute as a lingering reminder of his tragic attempt at resurrection. As Julian's mind raced with the implications of this discovery, the room grew colder. A sudden gust of wind extinguished the lamplight, and in the ensuing darkness, a voice, soft yet laden with despair, whispered his name. Startled, Julian fumbled for the matches and relit the lamp. For a brief moment, in the mirror across the room, he saw the faint outline of a man in old-fashioned attire, his eyes brimming with sorrow. Was it merely a trick of the mind, or had the spirit of Alistair Crane truly returned to reclaim his lost melody? Days turned into restless nights as Julian became increasingly isolated by his obsession with the flute. Neighbors noted the odd hours at which he would practice, sometimes until the early hours of dawn, his music echoing through the empty streets of Marrow's End. With each haunting tune, the spectral visitors grew bolder. They began to interact with the physical world. Objects would move inexplicably, doors would creak open, and in the stillness of midnight, the sound of distant weeping would seep into his apartment. One fateful night, while Julian was lost in a melancholic improvisation, the spirit swirled into a vortex of eerie light. A ghostly figure, larger and more defined than the others, emerged before him. Clad in a tattered military uniform, with eyes that burned like dying embers, the apparition spoke in a voice that resonated with both command and despair. "Why do you summon us, living soul?" the spirit demanded. Its tone was neither accusatory nor gentle, but filled with the authority of one who had long borne the burden of regret. Julian's heart pounded as he struggled to respond. I only seek to understand," he stammered. "The flute, it calls to me. I feel its sorrow, its longing. I meant no harm." The specter's gaze softened, and for a moment, the oppressive chill seemed to recede. "There is no harm in remembering," the ghost murmured. "But be warned, the music of the dead is not easily silenced, and once its melody is heard, its echoes may forever alter the living." Haunted by the encounter, Julian found himself tormented by vivid dreams. In these nocturnal visions, he wandered through corridors of mist and memory, guided by the ethereal strains of his flute. Each dream was a mosaic of fragmented scenes: a weeping bride, a lost child, a soldier in eternal vigil, all bound by an undercurrent of unfulfilled yearning. As the line between dreams and reality blurred, Julian's waking hours became a torment of their own. His reflections in mirrors and darkened windows no longer showed just his own face. They revealed the anguished visages of countless souls, each silently imploring him to help resolve their unfinished tales. The spirits, drawn by the flute's irresistible call, began to whisper their secrets. Some spoke of tragic love, others of betrayed promises or lives cut short by war and fate. Every note he played seemed to unlock another chamber of lost memories, another story of sorrow. Determined to bring closure to these restless entities, Julian sought out the wisdom of Madame Inez, a reclusive mystic known for her uncanny ability to commune with the dead. In a dimly lit parlor filled with the scent of incense and the murmur of ancient chants, she listened intently as Julian recounted his experiences. "The flute you possess is no ordinary relic," she said gravely. "It is a bridge between worlds, a device wrought from both genius and madness. Its music stirs the latent grief in our souls, allowing the departed to find a voice once more. But every summoning exacts a price. The more you invoke the spirits, the more entangled you become in their sorrow. You risk losing yourself in a tide of memories not meant for the living." Madame Inez warned him that the flute's power could soon overwhelm his own spirit, leaving him lost in a labyrinth of despair. Yet Julian, driven by an insatiable need to heal these broken narratives, resolved to continue, believing that perhaps, through understanding, he could finally grant the dead their long-awaited rest. On a cold winter's night, when the moon was a pale ghost in the sky and the stars hid behind a veil of clouds, Julian convened a midnight gathering in the abandoned chapel at the edge of Marrow's End. He had invited a small group of believers, skeptics, and curious souls, hoping that together they could witness, and perhaps even soothe, the lament of the departed. The chapel, once a place of solace and prayer, now stood in silent ruin, its stained glass windows shattered and its pews covered in a thick layer of dust. As Julian took his place at the ancient altar, he lifted the flute and began to play. The melody was soft at first, a tentative call that resonated with both beauty and melancholy. Gradually, the sound grew in intensity. From the shattered windows and crevices of the crumbling walls, figures began to appear. Dozens of spirits, their forms flickering like candle flames, gathered in the chapel. They drifted through the pews, their eyes reflecting centuries of pain and longing. The air was heavy with the weight of their unspoken stories, each spirit a silent testament to a life cut short or a love unfulfilled. Among the assembled ghosts, one figure stood out, a luminous woman in a flowing gown, her eyes filled with a sorrow so deep that even the cold night seemed to weep for her. As Julian's music swelled, she moved forward, her ethereal presence drawing all eyes. In a voice that echoed like a distant hymn, she spoke, "I am Eleanor, and my soul has wandered these halls for a century in search of redemption. Can your music mend the wounds of the past, or must we remain forever imprisoned in our grief?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Julian's fingers danced over the flute's keys. In that moment, he realized that the power of the instrument was not simply to summon the dead. It was to open the possibility for healing, for reconciliation between what was lost and what might still be redeemed. As the congregation of spirits listened, a palpable tension filled the chapel. Julian's music shifted in tone, taking on a darker, more urgent cadence. The melody carried with it the raw intensity of grief and the desperate hope for release. The spectral assembly responded in kind, their voices low and mournful, rising in a chorus that vibrated with ancient pain. But with the crescendo came a sudden disturbance. A violent gust of wind shattered the eerie harmony, and the atmosphere turned frigid. In the midst of the spectral gathering, a towering figure materialized, a man clad in a uniform of a long-forgotten war, his eyes ablaze with wrath and despair. His voice boomed through the chapel as he denounced the music, accusing it of dredging up sorrows that should remain buried. "You dare disturb the eternal slumber of the dead," he thundered. "Your melody unearths wounds best left forgotten, and in your hubris, you risk damning us all to an eternity of unrest." Julian's hands trembled on the flute. The gathered spirits recoiled, their forms wavering as if in agony. For a moment, the very fabric of reality seemed to tear asunder. The fierce spirit's words echoed in Julian's mind, a dire warning of the consequences that lay ahead. The flute's power, he now understood, was a double-edged sword. It could soothe, but it could also unleash forces that even the living could scarcely control. In that charged moment, Julian was forced to confront the true nature of his gift. He recognized that if he did not find a way to temper the flute's sorrowful call, the boundary between life and death might collapse entirely, and he would be forever lost in a sea of lamentations. With the hostile spirit's rage still echoing in the air, Julian made a choice. Rather than retreating in fear, he resolved to harness the flute's power for a greater good. He lowered the instrument and spoke to the restless souls in a voice both firm and compassionate. "Listen, all of you," he implored, his eyes reflecting the candlelight in an inner determination. "I understand your pain, your anger, your longing, but I believe that through our shared memories, we can find a way to heal. Let us not be defined by our regrets. Instead, let us write a new melody, a song of forgiveness and release." The atmosphere in the chapel shifted as if in response to his plea. The hostile spirit, though still seething with unresolved fury, paused to consider Julian's words. Slowly, one by one, the spirits began to murmur in agreement. Their voices, once sharp with despair, softened into a tentative harmony, a chorus of sorrow tempered by hope. Julian resumed playing, his music now a careful balance between the haunting strains of loss and the tender notes of redemption. As the notes flowed through the ancient chapel, the spirits gathered around him, their forms gradually brightening. The luminous Eleanor stepped forward once more, her eyes now shimmering with gratitude. "Your melody," she whispered, "reminds us that even in death, there is a chance for peace." For hours, the chapel resonated with this bittersweet symphony, a momentary truce between the living and the dead. Each note carried away a fraction of the ghost's anguish, weaving their scattered memories into a tapestry of healing. Though many burdens could not be entirely lifted, the collective release promised a future where the spirits might finally find rest. In the weeks that followed that fateful night, Julian became both revered and feared in Marrow's End. His performances with the enchanted flute drew small crowds of those who believed in miracles and those who whispered of curses. Yet for Julian, the true reward was the knowledge that he had given the dead a voice, a chance to mend their fractured pasts. Guided by his experiences, he dedicated himself to chronicling the stories of the spirits he encountered. In worn journals and faded ledgers, he recorded the whispered confessions of lovers separated by time, the regrets of soldiers lost to battles long forgotten, and the quiet sorrows of those whose names history had nearly erased. Each entry was a tribute to a life lived, a promise that even in the silence of death, no soul would be truly forgotten. Over time, the cursed flute itself became a symbol, a reminder of the delicate interplay between music and memory, between life and the inexorable pull of the afterlife. Julian eventually passed the instrument on to a worthy apprentice, someone with a gentle heart and the strength to bear its weight. And though the flute continued to call to the restless dead, it did so with a tempered grace, a legacy of healing forged in the crucible of grief and hope. Years later, when the name Julian Merrick was spoken only in hushed tones in Marrow's End, the legend of the flute endured. In quiet corners of the town, a library, an old chapel, or even a modest home, a soft, ethereal melody could sometimes be heard on moonlit nights. It was the sound of a flute that lured spirits from the afterlife, a haunting tune that served as a bridge between worlds. Those who heard the melody spoke of it as a call to remembrance, a reminder that the departed still lingered in the memories of the living, and that every life, no matter how fleeting, left an indelible mark upon the tapestry of time. And in that shared memory, the sorrow of the past was met with the promise of redemption, the echo of grief softened by the possibility of forgiveness. Thus, the tale of the flute, a tale of music, memory, and the eternal longing for peace, remained a beacon in the dark corridors of Marrow's End. It reminded all who listened that while the veil between life and death might be thin, the power of a compassionate melody could mend even the most broken of hearts. And so, as long as the flute's notes echoed through the night, the spirits of the past would find solace, and the legacy of love and loss would live on in every lingering refrain. In the end, the flute that lured spirits from the afterlife was more than a cursed instrument. It was a testament to the transformative power of art. Through its haunting melody, it connected souls across the boundaries of existence, turning grief into a symphony of remembrance and, perhaps, paving the way for a peace long sought by both the living and the dead. In the quiet town of Mirrorwood, nestled between rolling hills and dense ancient forests, legends were as common as the morning mist. Among these whispered tales, one story stood apart, a tale of a mansion that existed only in reflections. No one had ever seen the mansion in the daylight, yet countless locals spoke of its ethereal presence in windows, puddles, and antique mirrors. The mansion, they said, was a relic of a bygone era, its beauty and sorrow captured only when one dared to look at their own reflection. Evelyn Hart, a curious young writer with an insatiable appetite for the mysterious, had grown up hearing these legends. As a child, she would sit by the old fireplace in her grandmother's creaking house, wide-eyed, as elders recounted how the mansion had been built by an enigmatic family whose fortunes had dissolved into tragedy. Evelyn believed that somewhere, in those refracted images, lay hidden truths waiting to be unveiled. Little did she know that her life was about to entwine with that elusive, reflective world. One autumn evening, as the amber sun dipped behind the horizon, Evelyn found herself at the edge of Mirrorwood's forgotten lake, a placid body of water rumored to capture the soul of the town. The surface was perfectly still, a polished mirror reflecting the sprawling, bruised sky. As she peered into the water, something unexpected caught her eye. Between the dense silhouettes of trees, a sprawling structure loomed, an impossibility, for she knew the landscape all too well. The mansion's outline shimmered faintly, like an apparition conjured by moonlight and memory. Evelyn blinked, certain it was a trick of the light. Yet each time she returned to that lake, the vision persisted. A grand mansion with tall spires, intricate stained glass windows, and ivy coiling around its crumbling stone walls. It appeared only in the water's reflection, never in the physical realm. The sight ignited something deep within her, a fierce determination to understand its origins. The days that followed were filled with relentless inquiry. Evelyn scoured Mirawood's dusty archives and pored over brittle newspapers from decades past. She discovered fragments of a story, a wealthy family who vanished overnight, leaving behind a legacy of scandal and sorrow. Their ancestral home, she learned, was said to have been cursed, a place where the boundaries between the physical and the spectral blurred. Yet none of these accounts mentioned the peculiar phenomenon of appearing only in reflections. Armed with a notebook and an unyielding resolve, Evelyn began to track down anyone who might have encountered the mysterious mansion. Old Mr. Lennox, the town's unofficial historian, recalled how he had once seen a fleeting glimpse of the mansion in the mirror of an abandoned inn. It was like peering into another world, he whispered, his voice trembling with both fear and wonder. The reflection showed a home of both beauty and despair, beckoning silently. Every recollection deepened the enigma. Was the mansion a mere illusion, a figment of collective imagination born from grief and longing? Or was it something else entirely, a portal between worlds, suspended in the delicate interplay of light and shadow? One stormy night, driven by dreams of uncovering its secrets, Evelyn visited the abandoned Hartley Manor, a relic of Mirawood's opulent past. Within its decaying walls, dust motes danced in the beams of her flashlight, and time itself seemed to slow. In a neglected sitting room, among shattered chandeliers and faded portraits, she found an ancient mirror framed in ornate silver. Its surface was tarnished, yet when she gazed into it, the reflection wasn't of the ruined room behind her. Instead, it revealed a magnificent corridor lit by candles, where soft music and murmurs of voices echoed faintly, as if from another era. With trembling hands, she reached out to touch the glass. The moment her fingers brushed against it, the mirror pulsed like a living heart. In that pulse, she saw the mansion again, its grandeur intact, its halls filled with both splendor and a haunting melancholy. The mirror was more than a simple reflector, it was a threshold. Overwhelmed by both terror and wonder, Evelyn felt the pull of the other side, a silent invitation into a realm where the past lingered in every shadow. In the days that followed, Evelyn became obsessed. Each reflective surface she encountered, a polished tabletop, the smooth surface of a vintage teacup, even the window of an old storefront, seemed to echo the image of that spectral mansion. She began documenting every detail, the mansion's arched doorways, the twisted ivy, the intricate carvings that hinted at forgotten lore. In her writings, she wove together the disparate pieces of local folklore, historic tragedies, and her own surreal experiences. Her research led her to a reclusive scholar named Dr. Arthur Graves, an expert in metaphysical anomalies and supernatural lore. Dr. Graves explained that certain objects, under rare circumstances, can act as conduits between our world and a realm of echoes and memories. What you are witnessing, Miss Hart, is the interplay between physical reality and the realm of reflection, he said in a hushed tone during one of their many late-night discussions. The mansion exists in a liminal space, visible only when light refracts through mediums that capture more than just the surface. Dr. Graves theorized that the mansion was not entirely separate from the tangible world. It was tethered to it by emotions, memories, and unresolved destinies. Every time someone experienced a profound loss or yearning, their reflection might momentarily summon an echo of that forgotten past. In Evelyn's case, the mansion's appearance in her reflections seemed to be a mirror of her own inner quest for truth and belonging. Determined to cross the threshold, Evelyn planned a daring experiment. On a chilly winter night under a full moon, she returned to the lake where the mansion had first appeared. Standing at the water's edge, she scattered rose petals across the surface, each petal a symbol of hope and remembrance. With her journal clutched tightly, she stared into the water's mirror, waiting for the mansion to manifest. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then as the moonlight danced upon the ripples, the mansion emerged once more. A luminous structure, its features sharp and vivid against the dark water. This time, however, the reflection was not static. The mansion's windows flickered with candlelight, and faint figures moved behind the glass, as if enacting scenes from a long-forgotten play. Overcome by a mixture of dread and exhilaration, Evelyn whispered, "I'm here. I want to understand." The moment the words left her lips, the water's surface shimmered and fractured, and a crack appeared in the reflection. A single ghostly hand reached out from the fractured image, beckoning her to step through the veil of light. In that surreal instant, Evelyn felt her feet leave the solid ground. She was caught in the pull of the reflection, drifting toward a boundary where reality blurred with illusion. The sensation was both liberating and terrifying, like falling into a dream where every heartbeat echoed with ancient memories. When Evelyn opened her eyes, she found herself in a grand hall bathed in soft, flickering candlelight. The air was thick with the scent of old roses and forgotten promises. Marble floors stretched out beneath her feet, and high, arched ceilings soared overhead. The mansion was real in every detail, yet it felt as though it existed outside of time. Portraits of somber figures adorned the walls, their eyes following her every move. As she wandered through the labyrinthine corridors, she began to piece together the mansion's tragic history. In a dusty study filled with handwritten letters and brittle diaries, she discovered the story of the Beaumont family, a once powerful lineage doomed by heartbreak and betrayal. The family's patriarch, Charles Beaumont, had built the mansion as a testament to his love for his wife, Isabel. But when dark secrets came to light, whispers of forbidden love and bitter rivalries, the mansion became a stage for sorrow. One by one, the family members vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind only echoes of their former lives. Evelyn's heart ached as she read the faded ink of lost voices. Each diary entry, each letter, was a fragment of a larger, sorrowful mosaic. She learned that the mansion had become a repository for all that was unspoken, a silent witness to joy turned to anguish, hope drowned by regret. The reflections she had seen were not random apparitions. They were the lingering souls of those who had been trapped by their own unresolved histories. In a secluded chamber at the heart of the mansion, Evelyn finally encountered its most enigmatic resident, a spectral figure draped in garments of another century. The apparition's eyes, filled with centuries of longing and grief, met hers without fear. "You have come," the figure intoned in a voice that resonated like a distant bell. "I am Isabel Beaumont. I have waited so long for someone to remember our story." Isabel recounted the final days of her family in a voice both tender and sorrowful. She spoke of betrayal by those she had trusted, of a love that was doomed from the start, and of the curse that had sealed their fate. The mansion, she revealed, was not a place of malevolence, but a prison for souls unable to find peace. "We appear only in reflections because that is where our true selves remain, in the echoes of what was and the hope for what might be again," she explained softly. Evelyn, overcome by empathy and resolve, promised that their stories would not be forgotten. She vowed to write, to weave their memories into words that would transcend the boundaries of time. In that moment, the mansion's corridors seemed to pulse with a newfound vitality, as if the weight of its sorrow was slowly giving way to the promise of remembrance. Yet as dawn crept over the horizon, the spectral world began to fade. Isabel's form grew translucent, her features softening into a gentle smile. "Remember us, Evelyn," she whispered. And when you look into a reflection, know that every image is a story, a fragment of a soul seeking solace. With those final words, Isabel vanished, leaving Evelyn alone in the silent grandeur of the mansion. Evelyn awoke on the bank of the lake, the first rays of sunlight scattering over the water. For a long while she lay there, uncertain if the night's journey had been a vivid dream or a passage into another realm. But in her hand, she clutched a small, delicate locket, a tangible remnant from the mansion, its surface etched with intricate patterns reminiscent of the Beaumont family crest. In the weeks and months that followed, Evelyn chronicled her experiences with meticulous care. Her writings, imbued with both the beauty and tragedy of the mansion's story, captivated readers far and wide. The tale of the mansion that appeared only in reflections became a symbol of memory and redemption, a reminder that even the most ephemeral images held within them the power to connect us to our past and inspire hope for the future. Mirawood, once a sleepy town steeped in whispered legends, began to awaken to its own history. Visitors arrived in droves, seeking the enigmatic reflections in lakes, mirrors, and even in the surfaces of old windows. And every time someone paused to look, they too caught a glimpse of the mansion, a fleeting, luminous vision that bridged the gap between memory and the present. Evelyn's legacy, much like the mansion itself, became a living story, a narrative woven from the threads of forgotten lives and cherished dreams. The mansion, forever suspended in the interplay of light and shadow, reminded everyone that while time marches on, the echoes of the past remain etched in the reflective surfaces of our lives. It was a timeless testament to love lost and found, to the beauty of memories, and to the enduring power of stories that refuse to be forgotten. Years later, as Evelyn's own hair turned silver and her eyes grew wise with experience, she would often sit by a mirror in her study. Each glance into the reflective surface was a quiet conversation with the mansion, a silent reminder of the night when the boundaries between worlds had dissolved. In that moment, she understood that every reflection held a universe of possibilities, a mosaic of lives intertwined by fate and memory. For in every ripple of water and every gleam of polished glass lay the story of the mansion, a mansion that existed not in the physical realm, but in the shimmering, eternal realm of reflections. And so, as long as there were those who dared to remember, the mansion would never truly vanish. It would continue to live on in every reflective surface, an everlasting monument to the power of remembrance and the enduring magic of stories that transcend time. Thus ends the chronicle of a mansion that appears only in reflections, a tale of mystery, sorrow, and hope, woven into the very fabric of Mirawood. Every mirror, every glistening puddle, holds a secret story waiting to be discovered, if only one dares to look deeply enough.